Wallace. Wallace's early childhood in Scotland was marked by poverty, instability, and a lack of consistent adult protection. His mother suffered from mental health and substance misuse problems. She struggled to comprehend the situations she put her son in and often failed to intervene, which allowed Wallace's abuse to continue. Wallace's mother psychologically and emotionally abused him throughout his childhood. From a young age, adult men moved in and out of his life, and he was encouraged to refer to them as dad or uncle. This made it seem normal that adult men would be around him as a child. He was moved around many different home environments and learned to accept situations without question. His early experiences made him believe that adults could enter his personal space without consent, that fear should be tolerated, and that he had no control. Wallace's earliest memory of abuse occurred when he was 4 or 5 years old, when an adult came into his bedroom at night and got into bed with him. He could not identify who it was, but instinctively knew it was wrong. His main abusers were his mother's partner and the partner's brother, who both exercised authority over Wallace and were treated as trusted adults. They were connected to a biker group in the area. Not all members of the group were involved in the abuse, but a core group of men were. Wallace recalls being taken to a particular house where multiple men were present. It had a dark atmosphere lit by candles, possibly snake-shaped candle holders placed near the fireplace. The setting felt deliberate and staged. Multiple adults were sitting around watching him, which instinctively made him feel unsafe. He was led into a bedroom, restrained and raped by an adult. His mother's partner's brother spoke to him as if what had just happened was normal, despite the considerable pain and emotional distress he felt. Wallace asked if he would receive a toy for what had happened. He did receive one, but it was cheap and insignificant. Even then, he realized that there was no real compensation for what had happened to him. The same pattern of abuse occurred on multiple occasions. Wallace recalls seeing other boys and girls present who were usually restrained and drugged. He also recalls being drugged himself and losing consciousness. He would often wake alone or with other abused children, disoriented and distressed. This has caused long-term psychological damage. At one point, the police raided the property. They took Wallace outside and showed him adults one by one, asking if he recognized them. He had been coached to say these men were his uncles, and that is what he said. He associated authority figures with fear and wanted to avoid saying what he believed might be the wrong thing. As a result, the police intervention did not protect him. No safeguarding followed, and he returned to the abusive environment. The signs of abuse were there and only reinforced Wallace's view that speaking out would not lead to safety. As an adult, he eventually attempted to report what had happened to him, a disclosure which took years. He expected to be treated as a victim of serious childhood sexual abuse, but instead his disclosure was treated as a mental health issue. He was asked to provide psychiatric and medical notes before any proper investigation would take place. The lack of seriousness from the authorities resulted in Wallace's statements being recorded improperly. Due to this experience, he made complaints to the police, to professional bodies including the General Medical Council, and to other oversight organizations. Each process was slow, fragmented, and obstructive, and continued for years without resolution. During this time, he was forced to relive his experiences repeatedly while being met with skepticism. At no point was his well-being considered, which further compounded his trauma, as he once again felt dismissed, disbelieved, and unprotected. Owing to Wallace's abuse, he has experienced long-term psychological harm. This harm has affected his education, relationships, sense of self-worth, and his ability to feel safe. He wishes for his abusers and the authorities who failed to act to be held to account, and for his story to help protect other children from similar harm. Sebastian. Sebastian was raised in Scotland in a stable household. Sebastian's mother held down a professional job, owned her own home and car, and the family regularly went on holidays together. Despite this relatively secure background, which was not typical of abuse victims, Sebastian was raped and abused from the age of 6 by family members, without Sebastian's mother's knowledge. These family members instilled in Sebastian the belief that, to be safe, you had to give them what they wanted. This led Sebastian to develop a transactional view of interpersonal relationships. At age 11, Sebastian was introduced by these abusive family members to a local cafe owner. The owner gave Sebastian free food, lifts in his car, and free cinema tickets to build trust and a sense of obligation. From there, they began prostituting Sebastian out to a number of people. These included seemingly respectable professionals, such as estate agents, solicitors, care support workers for children, and even police officers. Even at boarding school, Sebastian was raped, assaulted, and groomed by staff and connected adults, with Sebastian's injuries often ignored by medical professionals. All of Sebastian's abusers were white British. In adulthood and during the final years of the abuse, Sebastian became aware of the wider operation of the grooming networks, both in a quiet rural area and in the city. At the age of 40, Sebastian was finally able to escape a cycle of abuse that had lasted for nearly 4 decades. Following years of abuse, Sebastian, born a biological female, transitioned to the opposite sex and now identifies as a trans man. Sebastian transitioned socially at 41 and medically at 48. However, when describing the abuse experienced as a child, it remains important for Sebastian to recognize that these events occurred while living as a girl and perceived as such. Sebastian acknowledges that this transition was, at least in part, a consequence of the abuse experienced, and feels safer from further abuse when presenting as a man. Sebastian recognizes the profound impact trauma can have on a person's life and believes that different people find different ways to cope. For some, that may mean choosing a particular career or relationship, or making unhealthy choices by using substances or alcohol. For Sebastian, transition and finding peace in being Seb became the pathway to recovery. Sebastian describes healing from trauma as a form of transformation. For Sebastian, that transformation has involved a change of personal identity and finding a sense of safety never known while living as a female. Sebastian understands that others may not fully understand the paths people take to cope with trauma, but hopes that at the very least they will try to understand. Sebastian now advocates for other survivors with the aim of protecting vulnerable people and helping to develop local measures to prevent child abuse. Anna. Anna was raised in a stable middle-class household with both parents present. She first experienced abuse at the age of 13 by a perpetrator who was almost 18, whom she met through friends. He began their interactions with what is known as love bombing. He complimented her, messaged her regularly, offered to buy her gifts and alcohol, requested photographs of her, and discussed meeting up. They arranged to meet at a local bus stop and go into town. At the last minute, he changed the plan and asked Anna to meet him at the end of a path in a nearby woodland. Upon arrival, his demeanor was cold and aggressive. He demanded that Anna perform oral sex on him and threatened to tell people she knew that she had sent him explicit photographs and that they had already had sex. Feeling threatened and fearful, she complied. Unbeknownst to Anna, he had covertly recorded the incident. A few days later, multiple men added her on Snapchat and began mocking and taunting her. The perpetrator himself sent Anna the video, laughed, and told her he had shared it with his, quote, boys and brothers, leaving her feeling humiliated, fearful, and traumatized. Anna reported the assault to the police, but despite explaining the coercion and threats, the case was closed with no investigation into the creation or distribution of child sexual abuse material. Rumors spread rapidly among Anna's peers, and she was mocked and insulted in public. A year later, Anna encountered 3 Muslim brothers through a friend who was already being groomed and abused by them. They supplied her with alcohol and cigarettes in a public park and waited until she was heavily intoxicated before they began assaulting her. One of the brothers pulled her behind a tree and groped her chest despite her repeated refusals. When she tried to flee, he pushed her violently against the tree, causing her to hit her head and suffer a concussion. The grooming continued through threats to her family, intimidation, verbal abuse, and cycles of affection, gifts, and coercion. Anna did not feel safe reporting the abuse to the police. On another occasion, she was again supplied with alcohol. One of the brothers grabbed her body violently, dug his fingernails into her, and yanked at her underwear repeatedly while laughing. Anna cried silently, feeling powerless to stop the assault. Afterwards, she tried to cut contact, but one of the brothers located her and banged on the door shouting, while she hid inside until he left. out of fear, she complied with further demands to meet the brothers, resulting in more assaults. There was a period of nearly 4 years before any trial was held, largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The perpetrators used this time to spread rumors portraying the abuse as consensual and to boast about the assaults. In the courtroom, the abuse and intimidation continued. They pulled faces, pointed and laughed at her, and made rude remarks about her appearance. This behavior was not addressed by the court. One of the brothers was convicted of sexual assault and, as he was taken into custody, shouted Allahu Akbar. At the sentencing, the brother's sister shouted abuse at Anna, threatened her and later breached her anonymity online. She blamed the jury, stating they were, quote, all white. She was eventually arrested and charged with malicious communications. Anna states there is a broader failure to confront the role of ethnicity, religion, and cultural dynamics in organized sexual exploitation due to fear of accusations of racism. Anna. As he left the dock to be taken down to custody, I was literally verbally assaulted by his sister, who shouted Allahu Akbar. Taylor. Taylor was introduced at the age of 12 to older men through her friends, many of whom were adult Muslim men. They began by giving her lifts home from school, sometimes in black cabs and sometimes in their own cars. Taylor saw the men buying gifts for her friends and initially wished she could receive gifts too. On one occasion, instead of being taken to school, she was driven to one of the men's sisters' houses and taught how to cook Asian food. Her friends spent more time with the men, but because her parents expected her to come straight home after school, she had limited contact with them beyond the lifts. She notes that her friends were already doing adult things such as smoking, drinking, and going to clubs, whereas she still had a more childlike disposition. This dynamic continued for 3 years until she turned 15, when the abuse began. She started going with her friends to a restaurant run by Muslim men to help with deliveries. This escalated when one of the men who worked there, a 35-year-old Bangladeshi man, kissed her, causing her to run away. The same man later raped her when she was 15. Because her friends were also being abused, Taylor believed it was normal and that the man was her boyfriend. However, when she walked in on him with one of her friends, she realized this was not the case. After this, her behavior changed dramatically. She began skipping school and drinking heavily. During a family incident that led to police being called, Taylor's father mentioned his suspicions that she was being abused by Asian men. The police responded that there was nothing they could do because she had consented. Police were called on multiple occasions regarding the abuse of Taylor and her friends, but they consistently refused to take action. The only time they helped her was when a group of Asian girls called the police. Officers then returned Taylor and her friends home. Taylor believes they only intervened on that occasion because they did not want to face accusations of racism, given that the call came from Asian women. By the age of 16, she had been introduced to many more men and was constantly harassed by them over the phone. Some men would initially appear kind and caring, leading her to believe they were in a relationship, only to lure her into situations where she would be gang raped. They used a combination of false kindness, violent abuse, and alcohol to coerce and control her. Cars would stop in the street and demand she get in. She would be raped and then taken to the next abuser. She claims that on some nights she was passed to as many as 10 different men, and estimates she was abused by around 100 men in total. One common tactic used by the gangs was to send taxis to pick up drunk girls late at night. The driver would pretend to stop at a shop for a drink, then drive off, leaving the girl behind. A group of men would then rescue her, only to take her to a pre-arranged house for gang rape. A number of women also played a role in directing girls to their abusers in exchange for gifts and money. These women would trap the girls in properties or use violence to coerce them. Taylor has witnessed shootings, had knives held to her throat, and a gun held to her head. The gangs used the death of one of the other girls as leverage, threatening that anyone who spoke out would be next. Realizing she had to escape the abuse, Taylor made a detailed 20-page statement to the police. She provided phone numbers of more than 100 Asian men and showed them messages in which the men threatened to rape her mother, beat her father, and burn down the family home. No investigation followed. Both her teachers at school and her GP were aware that something was seriously wrong, but did not pursue their suspicions further. Taylor. Before they raped me, they would chant Bismillah, Hir Rahman, Nir Rahim. Translation. In the name of Allah, the most gracious and the most merciful. Marie. Marie was born in a maternity home for unmarried mothers and grew up with her mother and grandmother. Her mother was cruel and abusive. She would deliberately make Marie cry, touch her inappropriately, and behave violently. She would go into school with split lips, black eyes, bruising, and marks over her body. She was never asked what had happened. She was not allowed to go outside, have friends, and was regularly called degrading names. Viewing her medical record as an adult, there were documented concerns from around a year old. There were notes of a rash down below, with question marks recorded. There were further entries where it was described as a possible nappy rash, again with question marks. 7 years later, a doctor made a note that she was a child that should be kept an eye on. Her mother refused to discuss her situation with Marie in the room. The record showed that she had significant bowel and gynecological problems. Despite the signs of abuse, no safeguarding action was taken. From around the age of 7, Marie's mother's partner began grooming and sexually abusing her. He would bring her presents and then touch her inappropriately. Marie said to him what he was doing was bad, and she did not like it. He told her that her mother had told him it was allowed. Her mother would ask Marie how she got on with him, demand she had thanked him properly, and would threaten to get angry if not. She was complicit, and the abuse continued for many years. Her mother would deliberately shame her. When Marie began to menstruate, she thought she was dying, but her mother told her periods were what dirty girls had. She deliberately gave her sanity pads that would leak so she could shame her and punish her. If she had a spot on her face, she would put a large blob of germaline on her face and tell her not to remove it, otherwise people would not know she was dirty. When she was unwell, her mother would get her partner to rub vapor rub on her chest. Her mother would soak her underwear in bleach and make her wear it, which still causes Marie discomfort to this day. In one instance, her mother and her partner forced a bottle inside her, which was painful. Her mother would attach clothes pegs on her clitoris to see how long Marie could last. Marie's mother also groomed her for others, and she had to share a bed with her. Marie was taken to another man's house by her mother's partner, where she was raped. He began to traffic her to other perpetrators he knew through his work that operated like an organized group or gang. She became pregnant as a product of her abuse. On 2 occasions, her mother took her to a woman's house. There, the woman used a knitting needle to perform the abortions. The woman's husband also raped her. She had bottle tops opened up inside of her vagina, then made to drink what was in the bottle when she was primary school age. There were instances where she ran into members of her grooming network who would lure her to a secluded location and rape her. The abuse she experienced included extreme sexual violence and degradation. She was raped repeatedly over the years, including anal rape. She was subjected to penetration with objects. She was urinated on, her legs were held open. She was bitten on the back, cut on the leg, and strangled. She has lasting injuries. Marie attempted to end her own life at school by walking in front of a van. At college, she drank a bottle of vodka and took a box of tablets in an attempt to kill herself. The college counselor raised concerns and contacted her GP, but nothing was done. Between leaving school and joining college at 17, she was groomed by a 55-year-old police sergeant. He knew her background and claimed that he would catch her attacker and get justice for her. Instead, one evening he offered to take her out of the house and raped her. He went on to rape her on another occasion. Upon becoming an adult, she went to a women's aid refuge for safety. They moved her to a safe location. On one occasion, her mother and partner went to the women's aid office, but they refused to give them information and introduced additional measures to protect Marie. While in the safe house, she miscarried, a product of her mother's partner. Following this, Marie drunkenly called her mother and told her what had happened. Even after explaining who impregnated her, her mother said, "We would have loved a baby in the house." She went to the police in recent years and told them that she was a survivor of child sexual abuse, and they told her to go away and sort her head out. None of the perpetrators have been brought to justice. Jane. Jane grew up in a fractured household. Rarely present, her mother was addicted to drugs and alcohol, regularly using hash and cocaine during Jane's childhood. She tried to end her own life on multiple occasions and left altogether when Jane was 7. Jane's father had significant mental health issues, though until the age of 5, she describes a generally positive relationship with him. However, after meeting a new partner following the departure of Jane's mother, he became colder, more distant, and increasingly abusive. He used his hands, a slipper, and a cane to hit Jane. Jane's mother re-entered her life with a new boyfriend when Jane was 13. The boyfriend was abusive towards Jane's mother and on one occasion raped her in front of Jane. It was around this time that Jane's mother's drug dealer began grooming her via Facebook. He had become aware of the fact that Jane was self-harming and presented himself as a sympathetic and supportive friend. Jane, vulnerable at the time, exchanged messages with him for several months. Eventually, the drug dealer began asking Jane whether she had ever smoked cigarettes, taken drugs, or had sex. During one half-term, he asked to meet with her. She agreed, and he came to Jane's father's house while Jane's father was at work, armed with a kosh. He took her up to her bedroom and told her to strip naked. He said, "You may be 13, but you've got the body of a woman," and raped her before promptly leaving. From then, the drug dealer regularly called Jane and waited outside her school for her. Jane would hide in the staff room and tell teachers that she did not want to leave, as she knew he would be waiting for her. The staff did not intervene and would force her to leave the school. The drug dealer regularly took Jane to his girlfriend's house, where he would give Jane Valium and cannabis. He would also show her the drugs he took, including heroin, methadone, and crack cocaine. The drug dealer sexually abused Jane every day apart from the weekends for several months. Jane was misdiagnosed with a personality disorder at this time. She did not tell anyone about her relationship with the drug dealer until one night during an argument with her mother, who was drunk. Her mother said, "I don't know why you are like this," and Jane replied, "Because I am being fucked by a 50-year-old man and nobody has noticed." The following day, Jane returned from school to the police at her house. The police insisted that Jane, still just 13, would need to testify in court alone against the drug dealer. Intimidated, she did not wish to face him, and he was not prosecuted. The following day, Jane returned from school to the police at her house. The police insisted that Jane, still just 13, would need to testify in court alone against the drug dealer. Intimidated, she did not wish to face him, and he was not prosecuted. Following the revelation of Jane's grooming and rape by the drug dealer, Jane's father called her a whore and told her that he wished she would just hurry up and kill herself. The school accused Jane of using self-harm to manipulate her father. She was regularly placed in detention and threatened with expulsion due to falling behind with schoolwork. As a result, Jane became increasingly disobedient and suicidal. At the age of 14, Jane began running away from school, taking drugs and spending time with men older than her. On one occasion, she took an overdose before school in an attempt to end her life. She was taken to hospital after the staff told her she would have done it in the woods or somewhere private if she actually wanted to die. Her father then came to the hospital and told her to try harder next time, as she was wasting everyone's time. Later that day, she attempted suicide by cutting her own throat, but failed. Jane was briefly taken into care at the hospital. She was discharged after less than a month, and everybody acted like nothing had happened. Her father would not accept her back into the family home, so she was left homeless. Jane spent a short period of time staying with friends until social services was informed about her situation by her aunt. Jane refused to return home, disclosing to social services that she was being physically abused and showed them the bruises on her body. She was then briefly taken into foster care before being moved into a children's home until she was 16 years old. Jane was then moved into a semi-independent living facility for vulnerable young children. After a few months, a female peer at the accommodation invited Jane to what she described as a party. This peer was coercive and intimidating, and Jane did not feel able to refuse. She was taken to a block of flats in Hounslow and expected to be met with a group of people her own age. Instead, the flat was occupied by 6 or 7 Somali men. Jane was taken into the bathroom by the girl who had brought her there and instructed to shave. She was told that she was being sold to the men for sex. Jane did not want to participate but complied out of fear. She was then sexually abused by one of the men and made to sleep in a small child's bed afterwards. The following morning, the girl who took Jane to the flat was paid by the men. This occurred repeatedly over a period of months, sometimes with multiple other girls present. Jane was told that she needed to gain weight to be more desirable to the men. In response, Jane began purging, which developed into a severe eating disorder. Jane was blackmailed with the threat of prison by the peer if she disclosed her exploitation to anyone. Violence and intimidation became commonplace at the semi-independent living facility. On one occasion, a young woman returned to the accommodation intoxicated and distressed, saying that she had been abducted and sexually assaulted. The staff, who were aware that sexual exploitation was taking place on the site, but chose to do nothing about it, responded by accusing her of making it up. Eventually, Jane disclosed her own sexual exploitation to accommodation staff, including the trafficking and exchange of money. She was told that what was happening did not constitute trafficking, as she was over the age of 16. The police were not contacted and no action was taken. Jane was blackmailed by staff with the threat of being blamed for the exploitation of her and others if she took her complaints any further. Jane's eating disorder intensified and she began self-harming again. She was sectioned under the Mental Health Act and admitted to a psychiatric hospital. While hospitalized, she disclosed the exploitation again. Police interviews took place, but due to her being heavily medicated, Jane was treated as an unreliable witness and no further action was taken. She also disclosed in writing what was happening to her. It was removed from her most recent social care file, but the original clearly states she wrote a letter to them a year before she was hospitalized, and her police interview matched the letter. The letter was not acted on by the authorities. As a result of her abuse and eating disorder, Jane has developed endometriosis, which has resulted in the loss of half her uterus. Jane has since learned that her records at the semi-independent living facility have been lost or destroyed despite statutory retention requirements. Even into adulthood, Jane has not received any closure, and attempts to get justice have been met with delays, obstruction, and re-traumatization. Jane states that she believes that children remain at risk due to the culture of silence that persists across institutions that should be caring for them. Jane. I later learned that key records from the children's home were missing or destroyed. Despite statutory retention requirements, my care file from that placement cannot be produced. This has obstructed accountability.